The New York Mets take game one of the NLDS. What a comeback victory from this team. We'll talk about it on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Like, I don't know, some team in Philadelphia. If you want to head out there and watch the next game, you're not there yet, head over to Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. All right, so the best way to describe this game for the New York Mets is they just outlasted Zach Wheeler. It's that simple. Zach Wheeler was excellent for the Phillies. He just was dominant, 7 shutout innings. He walked 4, gave up 1 hit, a flared single by Mark Vientos, but they just weren't going to score on Zach Wheeler. It wasn't going to happen. So they had to piece it together, and we saw Kodai Senga make his return. He gives up a leadoff homer to Kyle Schwarber, settles in after that. He faced 8 batters. There was the home run that he gave up to Schwarber. He walked Bryce Harper. He retired the other 6, striking out 3. That bridged the gap to a David Peterson start or bulk relief appearance. Peterson was great. 3 scoreless innings. First inning that he pitched, he worked around a walk and a single. The next 2, he worked around just a pair of walks or a walk in each inning. Overall, 3 scoreless from Peterson. And in that 3rd inning of work, bottom of the 5th, he got his 1 strikeout of the day. There was a runner on second base, a fast runner, mind you, as well. Bryce Harper was up. He struck out Bryce Harper, blew him away with the fastball. And then Reed Garrett, 2 perfect innings of relief. All of that just to match Zach Wheeler. But you know what? All those guys got the job done. Wheeler comes out in the 8th inning, and all of a sudden, the Mets just exploded. And not only did they exploded with a ton of 2-out hits, which was just a ton of fun to watch. These guys continue to grind, to battle, to show that Mets grit. Francisco Alvarez leading things off with a base hit in that 8th inning. Harrison Bader comes in to pinch run. Francisco Lindor falls behind 0-2, gets a pitch in the dirt that he somehow fouls off. Then he takes 4 balls, gets on. Then you have Mark Vientos, who gets the big first hit that ties the game, 2nd hit of the inning, but the clutch hit that drives in a run. He fell behind 0-2, saw a slider out of the zone, then saw another slider in the zone, measures it, laces it into left field. That gives the Mets a new slate, evened up ball game. You then have Brandon Nimmo coming up, and what do? They go right back to the bullpen again. They get Matt Strahm left on left. He gets ahead of Nimmo. Doesn't matter. Nimmo gets a base hit. Pete Alonso comes up. He falls behind 0-2. Same story. He comes through, not a hit, but a sac fly, and he put a good charge in that one. Just didn't get it further enough or far enough to drive it out, but it was well deep enough for a sac fly. Mets up 3-1. Jose Iglesias, an insane at-bat, falls behind 0-2. You get in the same pattern. He fouled off 7 pitches before finally putting one in play. The 10th pitch of the at-bat, he gets a base hit. Phillies go to the bullpen again because they don't want the lefty Strahm to face JD Martinez. Doesn't matter. JD gets a base hit to drive in the 4th run of the inning. And then Starling Marte makes it a 5-run frame with a sacrifice fly. So overall, just an unbelievable inning for the New York Mets to put up 5 runs. They showed a stat during the game that the Mets have more 4-run innings or more than any team in baseball this year. That's right. The Mets have more 4-run innings than the team that has Shohei Ohtani hitting all those home runs with Mookie Betts as his teammate. Doesn't matter. The Mets have the best lineup in baseball when it comes to putting up those big, big innings that can change a game. And in the playoffs, that's what you want. You want that one huge inning that can give your team either a come from behind or a big lead early. And the Mets all of a sudden seem to have the recipe down on how to win playoff games. Just depends on what you need on a given night. This one, when you're facing a pitcher as good as Zach Wheeler, make Wheeler work, and they did that. If they did make Zach Wheeler work, it could have gone through 8 innings potentially, and then you might lose this game. But the Mets were in it the whole time. The pitching did an amazing job keeping it close, and then once you finally got that relief of no longer having to face Wheeler, it was just an absolute outbreak from this offense. They tack on another run in the 9th inning. Harrison Bader gets a leadoff hit, ends up stealing second base because Bryson Stott juggled the tag. Otherwise, he would have been thrown out. And then Nimmo ends up getting another RBI there. I think the other big part of this game is you stay away from Edwin Diaz because Phil Maton pitched scoreless 8th. It was dicey, okay? Gives up a double to Bryce Harper, then a base hit to Nick Castellanos, but was able to get out of it unscathed. And then Ryan Stanek, who does give up a run, able to still get the 3 outs that you need without Diaz coming in. Diaz did have to warm up a little bit, but that's a big difference from actually getting into a high leverage situation, pitching in one of these games. For Edwin Diaz to get now 2 days off after throwing whatever it was, 105 pitches over a 5-day span, that's only going to help the Mets as you bleed into the next game here, game 2, where the Mets, all of a sudden, they got a chance here where it's a house money game, right? You just flip the series. You now have home field advantage. You can just win your 2 games at Citi Field, game 3 and game 4, and you have the series. Now you get a chance to potentially really put the Phillies on their heels in a game 2. This was as good as you could have expected for the New York Mets. Just showing that this is a team that can win the World Series this year. And there's no reason to talk around it anymore. This team is that good. They've been this good for 4 months, and everyone wants to talk about Mets magic, which is fair. I mean, this team does have those magical moments. But in some ways, I feel like just saying it's Mets magic can sort of discredit what this team has done for 4+ months now. We're getting on 5 months of this, where the Mets just find a way to win baseball games. They're a really good team, and they've been a great team here for a long time. And this is just a further continuation of that. I think they have finally let go of the pressure that they were playing with at the end of the season. And now, after going through that grind to get in, they're a team that is fully ready to take off. So what I want to talk about in the next segment is what is next here in this series. Luis Severino takes the ball in game 2. Can the Mets really keep this rolling and, I don't know, make this a little bit of a shorter series? We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Explore the U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. We're talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. Booking.com is the place to find your perfect stay with a wide variety of options across the U.S. You can go incognito to all of your baseball rival cities. Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any city, from hotels that overlook the stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays, so much more. Booking.com has all the choices that you might want across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today at Booking.com, Booking.yeah. If you guys are watching the live stream, do me a favor right now. Let me know in the comments if the connection's a little bit bad. I'm seeing something on my end. If it is, I will record a show that is not live and try to get it up as soon as possible. And if everything sounds good to you guys, please let me know. We'll keep on rolling here. I'll keep it going until I see some of those comments. Let me know how it's sounding. But let's talk about what's next for the New York Mets here. So now you get, again, house money game. Game 2 doesn't matter. You don't have to win it. You already did your job. You went into Philly and you took game 1. And I think that was the more important game to get because, for one, it sends a message. If you can beat Zach Wheeler, and I mean, the Mets didn't technically beat Zach Wheeler. They outlasted Wheeler and beat the Phillies bullpen. But if you can win that game, I think you're sitting in a really good spot for the rest of this series. But also, we talked a lot about rest versus rust or rest versus momentum, whatever you want to call it, going into this series. And for the Mets, you're looking at a situation where had they lost this first game, you might be, I wouldn't say in trouble, but you lose a little bit of that momentum that you carry over from the Pete Alonso homer. So now you continue off of first that Atlanta doubleheader to win that game 1. You go into Milwaukee, you win game 1 in Milwaukee. Yes, you lose game 2. Game 3, it came down to the wire, but you win it. You grab that momentum. Now you carry it into Philly, and you win game 1 again. So you're sitting in such a great spot where if you lose game 2, all right, you're going to get that extra charge of momentum when you head back to Citi Field and play in front of your crowd for the first time in 2 weeks, where that Citi Field crowd that's been going nuts during these watch parties gets to shower you with ovations for what you've done since you last were home. And the last time the Mets were home, they beat Zach Wheeler on Sunday Night Baseball. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks that the Mets have beat the best pitcher in baseball twice. And I mean, this time again, it was more the bullpen, but just a great victory. And now you're looking Severino versus Christopher Sanchez. The Mets can win this game. Luis Severino could pitch deep into this game, and Jose Budo has now had a couple days off. Edwin Diaz is rested. So you're looking at where the Mets are going into game 2. They got the pitching lined up to be able to win this game if they could score a couple of runs. And if not, again, you're looking at a game 3 where it would be even, and it's Sean Manaea versus Aaron Nola. Nola's obviously a battle-tested veteran pitcher. Get that, of course. But the Mets, the last time I saw Nola, they scored a bunch of runs against him. And I think Sean Manaea is due for an elite playoff start. He was good in the wild card round. I wish he would have gotten the 6th inning of that game, but that's no longer relevant. I want to see Sean Manaea in that game 3 give the Mets, 7 scoreless and really prove how good of a pitcher he has become this season. But again, when you're looking at where things are for the Mets, you're either going to go home with Manaea giving you a chance to get up in this series and potentially you can clinch it in that final game at Citi Field. Again, you don't have to win in Philly. You can sweep the 2 games at Citi Field and you're on to the NLCS. But Luis Severino, if he can match Christopher Sanchez, if the Mets can score on Sanchez or get into that Phillies bullpen again, and you have Budo to Diaz to potentially lock down that game, you feel really good about the Mets' chances to be able to really make the Phillies sweat here, go into Philadelphia and win both. I don't know, man. I don't know. This team, 10 wins away. Let's just own it. 10 wins away. The New York Mets could finally do it. The New York Mets could end this long World Series drought. It's hard not to dream when you see the way this team continues to step up game after game after game. And also so many guys just putting together good at-bats. I mean, that rally today, all of them, 2-strike hitting to Alvarez and Vientos, the 2 kids, to be the ones to get, for one, Alvarez to lead off the rally, for Vientos to drive in the run. That's so huge. That's such a big thing that this team has missed for a long time, getting that infusion of youth that can come through. These 2 guys are playing every single day on a team that is in the thick of a playoff race, and they're having their moments. Vientos, steady as can be at third base. We'll knock on some wood for him, but man, he has been so good over there. And then you have, again, with Alvarez being able still to put a charge in when we haven't seen Alvarez hit that playoff homer. So those 2 guys being so imperative to this team, and then the veteran presences up and down the lineup. Brandon Nimmo all of a sudden is locked in. Francisco Lindor, every single at-bat's a good one. Pete Alonso, I think the at-bats were much better in this game than they have been previously. So clearly, I think that home run, I believe that's carried over, and I would bet that Alonso is going to go yard at some point this series, and it could be a really big home run if it comes with a couple runners on. That can change another game for you. And you're really at that point or taking one game in a 5-game series. If Pete Alonso is a 3-run homer at any point over the next couple of games, you're probably going to win that one. So now Alonso being locked in, Starling Marte continues to just look like 2022 Starling Marte. He's been great out there. Tyrone Taylor still giving you good at-bats. I just love where this team's at. And I really believe this momentum can continue and carry over. Don't let the Mets win game 2, because if you let the Mets win game 2, I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if they win game 2, how could you not expect them to bring those brooms out and to greet the Citi Field faithful with something really special? This team's on a great run. You don't want to get ahead of yourselves. The Phillies could very easily get back into this series, but you could see it on the face of those Phillies players. You could see it on the fans in Philadelphia. They're nervous right now. They are very nervous, and credit to the Mets for once again showing that they're never out of a game. And this was one too where I never felt like they were out. Like when the Mets were in game 3 against the Brewers and the Brewers hit those 2 home runs that way, coming off of the meltdown in game 2, that was a time where I was nervous. This game, obviously, this isn't an elimination game, so there's not going to be as much nerves, but I really had faith that they were going to figure it out, find some way to get the job done, and it just happened like that. Wheeler's out, boom, 5 runs. Awesome stuff. And the crazy thing is the Mets could be getting even better. We've only touched on the fact that Kodai Senga made his long-awaited return from the IL today. So I want to go through that a little bit, as well as the potential of Jeff McNeil joining this team for a stretch run too. So the Mets could just be getting even better and better as the playoffs wear on. It's a great place to be. I'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you're near the Philadelphia area and you want to go to Game 2, you're going to find your tickets at Game Time. And I encourage you to. Let's get more Mets fans in that ballpark. Buy some Phillies fans tickets. Or if you just want to wait for Game 3 Citi Field, I am sure that is going to be a crazy environment. With Game Time picks, you're going to be able to filter out the fluff and find only the best deals on incredible seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. You can get your tickets from Game Time, the best possible deals, and last-minute tickets as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. So Kodai Senga made his long-awaited return off the IL, and now here he is pitching in Game 1 against Zach Wheeler. Obviously, he gave up that solo homer to Schwarber, but other than that, he looked pretty sharp, got up to 31 pitches, and now you sort of start to map it out, right? How many pitches can this guy get to by the end of this whole thing if the Mets go on a run that takes them the distance? This was the first outing, 31 pitches. Next time out could be Game 5 if it gets there. Maybe he's got 3 innings and 45 pitches this time. If you get to the NLCS and he wasn't used, you're still probably looking at that 45, 50 pitch mark for a potential Game 1 of the NLCS. Further along the series you get to, a second game of the NLCS or just your third start overall. So if he starts twice in the DS, the Mets advance. First start of the CS, you're probably looking at maybe 60 pitches, and then who knows, by the time you get to the World Series, this guy could be maybe not quite full go of 100 pitches, but if you get 75 pitches of Kodai Senga, I mean, that's so much more valuable than the spot in the roster that he took. And for those of you who didn't see the playoff roster today, Max Kranick was taken off. No surprise there. Kranick was never on the Mets roster during the season. He got added to the roster as he had been in the organization, so they were able to do that. And they basically just put him on to be a placeholder for Tyler McGill, as McGill was not going to pitch in the wildcard series. So McGill back on the roster, Kranick off. Also, Huascar Brazaban now taken off in favor of Kodai Senga. If you think about it, would you imagine Brazaban giving you 2 scoreless innings as an opener in any of the games in this series? Actually, not 2 scoreless. I imagine Brazaban might have given up the homer to Schwarber too. But regardless, my point is, Kodai Senga, more valuable than what you could have gotten from Brazaban. So even if this is all we see of Senga in the series, it was well worth it. But the fact is, he's now lined up to potentially pitch a Game 5. And that would be another one of these sort of bullpen kitchen sink games where the Mets are just going to throw as many arms at the wall as they can, find the right ones, and try to get through it. I love being able to make this sort of Senga Peterson tandem. I think you could do the same thing potentially if you get some good starts from Severino and Minaya and you hold that on using Tyler McGill. You could see a Quintana McGill sort of tandem as well, which helps you because a lot of times with these starters, the later and later they get into an outing, especially against a good lineup like the one you're going to see with the Phillies here for the rest of this series, and if the Mets advance, it's nothing but good lineups that could hit you in the NLCS, either the Padres or the Dodgers. So sometimes trying to turn a lineup over 3 times is really tough for a starting pitcher. I do believe David Peterson can do that, and I also think Jose Quintana just showed he can do that against the Brewers. But having that insurance of being able to go to either McGill or, in this case, if they're going to keep Peterson in that role, I think it just makes the Mets that much more dangerous. And it sort of sucks for David Peterson in some ways because he has earned being the number 3 starter on this team. He has earned the right to make playoff starts. But sometimes the guys coming out of the bullpen, they pitch the more pivotal innings. And for this game, David Peterson covering those 3 innings, that was huge. You get into a game 5, and let's say Kodai Senga gets you 3 innings. Maybe David Peterson could get you 4 or 5. And all of a sudden, you might be able to just use those 2 guys and bridge it right to Edwin Diaz. So I think now, because the Mets have Senga in the fold, we still haven't seen McGill yet in the postseason. They have 6 starting pitchers. That's incredible depth to really go through October. And the way you manage these games gets completely different. It really is just a game-by-game, inning-by-inning type of a circumstance for Mendoza to navigate it. And he's pushing all the right buttons now. This gives the Mets a chance to overcome a bullpen that, let's be honest, isn't great. I mean, in this game, you score the 5 runs and then you get the other insurance run. It's not like Phil Maton and Ryan Stanek cruised through it. Reed Garrett was the best reliever today. 2 perfect innings. If you get more of that, that is going to be huge for this team. But I think a lot of these guys are going to be a little bit hit or miss. There's going to be some games where Reed Garrett's on, other games where he's not. Same thing with Stanek, with Maton, with Budo. You, outside of Edwin Diaz, you don't really have the lockdown reliever. And even Edwin can be inconsistent this year. So getting that starting pitching depth back is so massive for this team. It's the exact same formula that we saw last year that took the Rangers to a World Series victory. They had guys like Andrew Heaney and Dane Dunning, guys that could come into games and bridge the gap because they didn't have the lockdown bullpen. It was like 2 guys in that bullpen last year. It was Jose Leclerc and, I'm forgetting the other one. They had 2 guys, though, pretty much the whole postseason. And then Chapman was used and at times wasn't even trusted. So I think the addition of Senga just gives the Mets such an edge because there's also the emotional edge for your team to see Kodai Senga on the mound. It must be crazy for these guys that have worked so hard to get into this position, and all of a sudden the ace you've been missing all year takes the mound for game 1 of the NLDS. That provides a lift to you. It really does. So I think that's going to continue. And then the other element that the Mets could add back into this team is Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil, now with the team in Philly, they said he's ramping up baseball activities. He could join the club in the NLCS potentially. I mean, he's with them now, but he could be added to the roster. Whose spot would he take? I know Mets fans who love Luisangel Acuna don't want to hear this. It's probably Acuna. I can't see them leaving off Harrison Bader. I mean, you could if you wanted to. Acuna could cover those outfield spots. You'd have Jeff McNeil. But I think they love Harrison Bader's center field defense late in games. And as great as Acuna was for that week covering Lindor, that was huge. I mean, you go back and you look at the championship DVD, if the Mets get there, you look at that, at all the highlights of the season, Acuna stepping up and being a superstar shortstop for a week. That was huge for the Mets. Every single one of those wins when the Mets went 6-1 without Lindor the second to last week of the season proved to be vital. So Acuna deserves everything he gets coming to him after this season. But Jeff McNeil's a seasoned veteran who has experience going up against a lot of the pitchers that you'd be facing throughout the stretch run. And he's just, I'm sorry, I still believe at this present moment today, assuming he looks good health-wise, Jeff McNeil's a better baseball player than Luisangel Acuna. And that's no knock on Acuna. He's a rookie, very limited experience. And we saw him today. He struck out looking on kind of a hanging curveball, if I'm not mistaken. Not to knock him, just to acknowledge it, that I think Jeff McNeil would give you a better at bat. I think Jeff McNeil would give you better versatility when it comes to the defense. Like, Jeff McNeil has played a big league outfield before. Acuna has not. So the ability to do what we've seen in the past, move McNeil to the outfield, to the infield, I don't think he'd be starting either. How are you going to take Jose Iglesias out of the lineup or Mark Vientos? Maybe if you wanted to start him in right field, that could be a potential option. But being able to put Jeff McNeil into a game where, let's just say, you got a really tough righty reliever and Tyrone Taylor's leading off a tie game in the 9th inning. To be able to go to Jeff McNeil to grind out at bat and try to get a hit and get on and start a rally, that could be big for this team. And it just makes them that much better. So this Mets team all of a sudden doesn't just look poised to be able to knock off the Phillies. They look like they could be poised to, I don't know, win the World Series. We'll have to see. But you really are getting to that point as a Mets fan where you can dream. We just have to see what happens in game 2. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens next in this series. And the Mets will go back home on, Tuesday with at least a tied series and a chance to win both games at Citi Field and never have to go back to Philly. They got the job done early. All you need to do in these series is win one of those first 2 games on the road to flip the series. The Mets did that, and they did that despite the fact that Zach Wheeler was absolutely brilliant for the Phillies. It just didn't matter. They pieced it together. They kept themselves in the game. And once again, the Rally kids coming through late give this fan base another exciting victory to celebrate. Awesome stuff. I'll be back with another show tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll do a live stream after that game because I think I'm going to try to watch it with my dad at his house. So if I do hop on a live stream, it would be, I don't know, like an hour after the game. If not, I'll have a show for you Monday morning for sure. I appreciate all of you who continue to tune in. Also, I know if you want more Mets content, you're seeing it on your podcast feed, the Locked On Mets postcast, which might also be streaming right now as well. Chris is doing a good job at that. That's over on the new Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel, which gives you post-game streams after everything in New York sports. So after your Jets or your Giants game on Sundays, once we get to basketball season with Knicks and Nets, and obviously right now Mets and Yankees, you can find those post-game streams over at Locked On New York Sports. So subscribe over there. If you're watching this stream now, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel here. We already hit the goal of 10,000 subscribers. I appreciate all of you for helping us get there. And again, I'll be back with another show very soon. Let's go Mets, people. 10 wins away from the World Series, 2 wins away from the NLCS. What a ride it has been.